Attendees and guests, our program is about to begin. Please find your seats. Please welcome Miami Mayor and the President of the United States Conference of Mayors, Francis Suarez.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you've had your Starbucks or Cuban cafecito this morning. And welcome to the 90th Annual U.S. Conference of Mayors. I want to welcome all the mayors, business council members, partners, city staff, and others who have traveled to be with us today. Tomorrow, we will have our official opening ceremony, but at this time, I want to thank our host mayor, Hillary Sheevy, and her entire team who have done so much to arrange what I know will be a memorable and impactful annual meeting. Let's please give them a round of applause. Now, before I move on, I'd like to ask you all to join me in a moment of silence to remember all of those that we've lost in just the last few weeks to gun violence in Tulsa, Uvalde, and Buffalo, in far too many cities across this country, and for all the loved ones, friends, and communities left behind who are suffering so much from this senseless and tragic loss of life. Thank you. As we move through the conference this weekend and discuss the kind of cities we want to build as mayors, I would ask that we keep these victims, their families, and their communities in our thoughts, and ask ourselves how our nation can better protect the communities that are entrusted to our care. Now, we're going to open our meeting with a discussion about the health and well-being of all Americans. This is particularly relevant for mayors as we continue to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic in our cities. I've seen how all of us are working to foster resilience during a time that Dr. Anthony Fauci has called a more controlled phase of the pandemic. But I also see us looking ahead and continuing to embrace solutions that better prepare and fortify our cities against future threats. Mayors are leading the way on this critical effort, especially as America's workers return to the workplace, as people gather again in our municipal buildings, and as students return to in-person learning. In Miami and in cities across the country, we're looking much closer at the outsized role buildings play in keeping us safe and healthy. In fact, we spend roughly 90% of our time indoors. which underscores how important it is that our buildings are better positioned to protect and advance human health. That's why I want to talk more about it today, this growing healthy buildings movement and what it means for our cities. I'm delighted to be joined by a leader who is driving this digital movement. Please welcome to the stage our very first panelist of the conference, Paul Shala, CEO of Delos and founder of the International Well Building Institute. Hey, Paul, thank you so much for being with us to discuss this critical issue of healthy buildings in our cities. As we just saw in the prior comments, 90% of the time that we spend indoors. And so the health of the surrounding environment is as important as when we are outdoors. I know that you have worked for the past decade and it has been focused on a singular vision, which is to make all our buildings healthier for the people inside, which has led you to create the International Well Building Institute in 2012 after several years of research and development. Can you please tell us a little bit about that journey and explain why in 2014 you had also created the Well Building Standard and why it should be so important to mayors, especially post-pandemic? You sort of saw the possibility that something like this could happen and you were ahead of the game.
Mayor Suarez, great to be with you, and welcome everyone to the Conference of Mayors. Yes, as you said, guys, we spend 90% of our lives inside. Take your age, multiply that times 0.9, and that's how much of your life you've spent inside of a box called four walls and a roof. So we wanted to take an evidence-based approach to connect the built environment with the human condition. In regards to sustainability, we've seen incredible advancements in environmental thought and planetary health. But the sustainability dialogue is not incomplete until we also address the human health or biological side of the equation. So the better part of 5 years and over $100 million of research capital was put forth to really begin the architecture of this well-building movement. We pulled in the world-renowned Mayo Clinic, Cleveland Clinic, over 300 doctors and medical experts from around the world, got them together with real estate professionals of all types. Owners, operators, developers, architects, engineers, facilities managers, HR professionals, to best understand what surrounds us indoors and how that matters. Ultimately, the Well Building Standard, which covers everything you could imagine that surrounds people inside, both from an operational standpoint and a spatial standpoint, air quality, water quality, lighting, thermal, acoustics, biophilic programming, surface and cleaning protocols, operational guidelines. All of these things map directly to our respiratory, cardiovascular, immune, cognitive, digestive, and sleep health outcomes. So ultimately, we introduced the Well Standard in 2015. Proud to say today, the International Well Building Institute is the world's largest certification platform for healthy and safe indoor spaces. We're in 108 countries, almost 4 billion square feet of real estate projects. New buildings, existing buildings, large, small, does not matter. Everything from a nail salon or a barber shop all the way up to an airport and everything in between are achieving the WELL certification program and the newly launched WELL Health Safety Rating. With the onset of the pandemic, we felt it was important to create a scalable platform to take the 100 features of the WELL standard and zoom in specifically on health and safety protocols. And the new WELL rating has scaled considerably. We're going to get into the achievements that the city of Miami has accomplished. JP Chase, for instance, has applied the WELL rating to all 6,000 bank branches and global offices, T-Mobile retail stores, places like Yankee Stadium or the Empire State Building. And importantly, we wanted to educate the public on what that WELL seal symbolizes, a third-party verification of good practice. And so we did embark on a campaign last year to educate the general public to look for the WELL seal, to build confidence, to go back into our public spaces and into our buildings. And I'd like to show a little video that was ultimately reached over 4 billion media impressions in 95% of the US adult population last year. And then we'll get into more specifics on the great achievements the city of Miami has made, which we'll get into. Again, it's such a pleasure to be here, but this is how we're getting the message out.
If you want to get back to your favorite places and feel confident they have put your health and safety first,
look for the Well Health Safety Seal.
Look for the Well Health Safety Seal.
Look for the Well Health Safety Seal.
I'm Dr. Richard Carmona, the 17th Surgeon General of the United States of America. This is the Well Health Safety Seal from the International Well Building Institute, the global authority on healthy buildings.
The Well Health Safety Rating was informed by years of research and input from hundreds of leading virologists, public health experts, epidemiologists, and building professionals around the world.
You'll see it at schools, offices, banks, childcare centers, all the places we go.
The Well Health Safety Seal means that we'll feel better going into restaurants,
theaters, stores, hotels,
Stadiums, and all the places that we love.
Everything may look the same, but the Well Health Safety Seal means that your health and safety are top of mind when it comes to
cleaning and sanitizing procedures,
Air and water quality management.
Emergency preparedness programs.
And health services.
so look for the Well Health Safety Seal outside.
and feel more confident going inside. Learn more about the Well Health Safety Rating at wellhealthsafety.com.
Wow. I mean, it's clear as to why it got 4 billion impressions. Not only is it a powerful message, but it's delivered by some incredible people who have extensive networks. And I can only imagine how difficult it is to get people of that caliber to deliver this message. You know, it sounds like this moment presents a tremendous leadership opportunity for mayors to be at the forefront of the healthy building movement. As for my part, it was a priority for me to make sure that Miami was walking the walk. That's why we embraced WELL for our public buildings, including City Hall, of course. And I'm proud that so many of our city buildings have now been WELL Health Safety rated. Is that the first step that mayors should be looking at when they look at their municipal buildings? I know that we're very proud of the fact that we were ranked the healthiest city in America, and when we spoke about it, I said, look, this dovetails with our brand, right? We want to project health, wellness, and particularly during a pandemic. What do you recommend?
Well, Mayor Suarez, with your leadership and the great work by the City of Miami, the City of Miami has become the first in the country to achieve the WELL rating across municipal and public building portfolio. This is scalable. This is an entry to the broader movement of WELL building. This applies to any building, large and small, existing, new, does not matter. And most importantly, this is a focus first on things you can implement right now. Operational protocols, things like your cleaning practices and frequency therein, emergency preparedness and continuity management, health services, stakeholder engagement, air and water quality assessment. But with the work of the City of Miami, and again with your leadership, Mayor, the City of Miami, I think, achieved this process in about 2 months, a little less than 2 months.
Yeah.
There is no CapEx requirement for this. We're not talking about heavy budgetary elements. This, again, first focuses on operational excellence and policies and procedures that lead to healthier and safe indoor spaces. Mayors across the country can lead. If we start to demonstrate our public buildings and access to them with good protocols in place, private sector will continue to adopt and follow the lead. As mentioned, we've seen a lot of great private sector adoption already, but we're really looking forward to, again, taking the City of Miami, healthiest city in the country. I know you're very proud of that designation, the achievement of the WELL rating, and looking to ask all mayors to take action and look to achieve this WELL rating across their building portfolio.
So drilling down a bit, what would you say is the first thing that mayors need to do to begin this process?
Yeah, we have a great team and a support system. First and foremost, with well-accredited professionals now, actually in 94 countries around the world, but tens of thousands of professionals, whether they're consultants, architects, engineers, HR professionals, but there's a broad ecosystem. But this is pretty simple in terms of how to get started. There is a card that's been placed, I think, on your seats. We'll also have a presence here. But very simply put, at wellcertified.com, which is that website for the International Well Building Institute. It'll demonstrate how you begin this journey. And this is not something that needs to be complicated for folks to think, well, we're a smaller town with less resources, what have you. Again, we have seen everything from nail salons and barbershops and bakeries achieve the WELL rating, all the way up to gigantic facilities or global enterprise portfolios, and everything in between. It does not matter what type of facility it is. What matters are the operational protocols, the guidelines put in place to care for those facilities. So a great start is to get the well health safety as part of your dialogue. Also, when you consider policy, you know, look, I think it was in 2000, the city of Seattle was the first to achieve LEED certification. 20 years ago, that kickstarted a tremendous advancement of green building protocols and environmental consideration, our buildings and their impact on the planet. Today, we're here to obviously focus on our buildings and their impact on all the people inside them. That's why we build our buildings and operate our buildings in the first place. So, 20 years on, with the leadership of many, many mayors and cities around the country towards the green building efforts, we are now at a moment in time that we can advance the well building efforts to complement the green building efforts. And City of Miami, the first to achieve the WELL rating, just as the City of Seattle in 2000. And once again, I want to thank you for your leadership. You got this immediately.
No, thank you, Paul. Yeah, for me, it goes to your point. When you look at the numbers, it just makes sense. When you're talking about 90% of the time are indoors, when you talk about, whether it's fitness or nutrition, we sometimes forget to focus on ourselves. Yeah. We forget, we spend a lot of time sleeping, so do we have a comfortable bed? And do we, what are we doing to nurture our own health? And I think we take some things sometimes for granted. And I think the well building rating is something that should, first of all, be done by all buildings, right? This is something that they should all do. But it should also give people comfort, particularly after coming out of a pandemic, or hoping to come out of a pandemic, where air quality is so important, where understanding the elements of where you're going is such a big part of the decisions that you have to make on a day-to-day basis. Things we used to take for granted. Yeah. Tell us how the pandemic has really sort of influenced this movement that you've begun.
Yes, in our early days of research, one thing that fascinated me was when you think of our health outcomes, our chronic health outcomes at a population level, 5% of those outcomes are genetic. And we can't do anything about that, at least not yet. And then when you consider up to about 20 to 25% of our chronic health outcomes are basically access to care and lifestyle. What we eat, what we drink, how much we exercise. This is what's fascinating to us. The rest, up to 70% of all of our health outcomes, everyone in this room, on stage, what have you, are determined by our surrounding environmental and social conditions, basically where we place ourselves. And in today's day and age, as mentioned, it's most of the time indoors. Unfortunately, it took a global pandemic to draw some highlights on some very overlooked things for many, many years. Air quality, for instance. For the better part of a century, indoor air quality has been basically 2 to 5 times worse than outdoor air quality anywhere you go. You're not hiding from pollution by going inside.
Wow. I would have thought that.
No, yeah, you think it's an invisible killer, if you will, right? There are billions of pollutants anywhere indoors, particularly because there's no ventilation. We saw tremendous adoption of the well building movement in the 6-7 years of launch since before the pandemic, but since the onset and now coming through all of that, the focus, and here's the upshot, and here's the optimistic lens. If we can use a horrific environment like that to correct things and to make things better, to lead to better and healthier outcomes for folks in the future, that's our opportunity set.
Well, we've certainly tried to do it in Miami, and I think you said something that was very important at the beginning. This is scalable. This is not something that was capital intensive for us. We got on it. We got our team on it. But I think that this is something that big cities and small cities, sometimes we have ideas here that are a little harder for smaller cities to adopt, just because of the nature of the fact that they may not have the same staff or capabilities. But this is something that, we walked that journey with you. And it's really a huge honor for me as president of the Conference of Mayors and as mayor of a city like Miami, that we pride ourselves on health, to be able to say that our buildings are well built.
Your staff was awesome. Your leadership initiative obviously was perfectly timed. And to your point, it's a great one. Small town, large city, small municipality, what have you. The resources required here really have to do with a handful of folks, okay, from your staffers with regards to HR policies or facilities guidelines or health and safety protocols. Our team puts forth fully complementary services to get you through the rating, to get you through the system. And the ultimate cost of this gets down to a couple $100 per building for that document review, for that verification, with no CapEx required. This has been built to scale. This is evidence-based. In fact, when we saw the onset of the pandemic, we said, look, we need to zoom in on health and safety protocols. We commissioned U.S. Surgeon General Richard Carmona and over 500 behavioral scientists, public health experts, building scientists, virologists to take our feature set, create a new rating that's relevant to health and safety, and launch that within several months. And the adoption's been pretty incredible. And it's really, again, about communication, that well seal on the front entrance of a building for the general public, for the employee population to know that good practice is in place.
Paul, thank you so much. It's clear that you guys have spent a tremendous amount of resources. You have great advocates, great scientists. You've put a ton of effort into this. And so I want to thank you for participating in this important dialogue. And to my fellow mayors, I want to encourage you to be a part of this movement. Each of us should be a leader on healthy buildings. It's critical to making our cities healthier and stronger. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mayor.
Talk to Paul and his team.
Thank you, guys.
And take a look at what we've done in Miami as well. Nice. Thanks, Paul. All right. Now, for those of you who attended our winter conference in January in Washington, D.C., and you heard me talk about the importance of the new crypto economy and how hard I am at work turning Miami into the next Silicon Valley by bringing jobs and opportunity in crypto to our city. In the time since our winter conference, my city hosted a special crypto summit for mayors, where we heard from a roster of distinguished guests like the mayor of Reno, who we're going to hear from today, Hillary Sheevy, and international tennis superstar Serena Williams. We're fortunate enough to have one of our favorite guests from the Crypto Summit moderating our next panel, my good friend, Saif. Saif is a managing partner at Lab 22C. He is one of the most knowledgeable people that I know on the subject of emerging cryptocurrency markets. It's no wonder I asked him to be my senior advisor for tech and innovation. Welcome to the stage, Saif Ishouf, and other honored panelists, Mayor Sheevy and Kelly Callahan, head of marketing at Algorand, a big blockchain company. Thanks.
Here we go. Good morning. There you go.
I guess it's all together. Hi,
Yeah,
good morning.
good to see you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mayor Suarez. Good morning, Mayor Sheevy. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
We're really excited to be able to have this conversation here at the U.S. Conference of Mayors, building upon a lot of the momentum and leadership that you've laid out and your colleague mayors like Mayor Sheevy and others have underscored. But for the purposes of today's discussion, we're going to actually avoid a lot of big jargon. We're going to avoid a lot of sometimes what happens when you have conversations about blockchain, the sizzle and not the actual stake. So, and I know that that's something that matters a lot for Mayor Suarez as we're sharing and creating a learning space this morning. And so with that, Mayor, I wanted to start with you because you are arguably one of America's most knowledgeable leaders in and around blockchain and crypto and have become yourself deeply ensconced in learning about this. So I wanted to ask you to actually begin by sharing through a mayor's vantage point, what is blockchain and what is Web 3.0?
Well, blockchain and Web 3.0 signify the future of where the world is going. It's the future of our economy in terms of how potentially things are transferred, value is transferred. It's how new value is created when you look at things like NFT, which are unique digital assets. And then when you think about how much time we spend looking at our phones, I mean, it's something. There's a feature in the iPhone that you can see once a week how much time you actually spend on your phone. It would probably shock you to know how much time you spend on your phone. And people who tell me, well, I don't really understand the metaverse. You know, I say to them, check how much time you spend on your phone, because the time that you're spending on your phone is the time you're in the metaverse. You are in another portal. And, you know, for our children, I have an 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. This is pretty simple stuff. It's pretty standard. They spend a lot of time gaming, which I didn't know much about growing up. I played basketball and baseball and soccer and all that. They're gaming. And, you know, so they're spending a lot of time in these virtual worlds. So, you know, I think for me, first, I realize that reality. Some people like tech. Some people don't like tech. Tech is certainly not perfect. But it's becoming more and more a part of our lives, and that is inescapable, inevitable. You know, my 4-year-old takes a selfie with her pacifier, which often reminds me that tech isn't going anywhere. So I think that's one reality. I think the second reality is as a city, how do you lean into this disruptive opportunity and build an ecosystem? I was doing a Fox Business interview where Stuart Varney, and Stuart sort of has this British accent, and you know, he's older than my father, and he says, you know, Mr. Mayor, I just don't understand this crypto thing. I don't get it. And I said, Stuart, let me try to give it to you in a way that you can understand it. I said, first, we had a company called FTX that spent $200 million on renaming our arena. That's $200 million. We were able to use a portion of that for a gunfire reduction program, and we reduced our homicides by 23%. So there is a tangible benefit right there. I said, number two, we had the Bitcoin conference. We had Algorand come into town and be such a huge participant in our ecosystem, creating so many jobs. We have companies like blockchain.com and eToro and Galaxy that have come, all creating hundreds of high-paying jobs. I said, these are all paid in dollars. I mean, they can take it in Algorand. You know, I want to take my salary in Algorand. I take part of my salary in Bitcoin, actually all my salary in Bitcoin now. But you know, so I think that people don't understand that there is an ecosystem component to this, which creates jobs and economic development that is separate and apart from the technology, separate and apart from whether Bitcoin is up or down or anything like that.
Thank you for sharing that insight. And Mayor Shivi, I know that you have also made major strides here in Reno as another critical node in the global blockchain network. And so what about the prospects for crypto has you excited for America's cities, and specifically your great city here, the city of Reno?
Yeah, I would say, I think all of us know this, that who are in government, that technology in government is so antiquated, right? And this could be a massive opportunity for governments to start really paying attention to. Yesterday, we actually just launched something on the blockchain where we will upload like our historical registries. And that is really important because we want to preserve them. And I would imagine many of you probably have some of that information in bankers' boxes, right? That's how antiquated government is. We did at the city of Reno. But this is really, really exciting technology. And I know it's very early adoption. And here's what I would say to mayors, especially if you're like, I don't understand it and this seems confusing and I'm scared of it, whatever. I think the biggest power that mayors have is the opportunity to open doors for other people. And there are other people that are much smarter than us, especially in this space, right? That will come to you and reach out and say, hey, I'd like to start a pilot project in my city. That's what we're doing at the city of Reno. Several of my team members, because they're young and innovative and exciting, came to me and said, hey, we want to experiment with some blockchain applications, and that's exactly what we did. And I feel like it's really my job to go out there and help them champion this innovative technology. Matter of fact, I'm really excited because we're going to be launching the first public art NFT, which is a non-fungible token. I know many of you are like, what is that? But it's going to be a great use case, so in a way that we can fund public art moving forward. And I'm really excited because what I really would love to do, and you guys are all going to help me do this, is put many of our public art pieces, some of the most well-known in cities, in the metaverse. I know they're all going, what's that look like? But it's going to be really exciting because I think it's a whole world that's living out there virtually, and it's going to exist. And mayors need to be ready because it's coming.
Mayor Shivi, thank you for sharing that. And I also want to applaud the way that you're thinking about blockchain technology, which is, I know, something that Mayor Suarez talks a lot about in Miami, which is that this is not about the volatility of just crypto prices, but actually how the decentralized web can be leveraged for real-world use cases and making cities more accessible for residents, democratizing access to capital. And one of those blockchain technologies and companies and ecosystems that's been leading that charge have been our friends at Algorand. And so, Kelly, I'd love for you to start with what is Algorand, and also for you to give us a little bit of an explanation about when people use this word blockchain, what does that actually mean?
Thanks, Saif. First of all, how much time do we have?
Yeah.
No, without getting too much into the weeds, like Mayor Suarez said, blockchain represents a better, faster way to exchange value. The same way that the internet lets us exchange information. I can send you an email and tell you that it's snowing in Boston and it's sunny in Miami. You can send money, any amount, with minimal costs. And it's not just money, it's ownership of a piece of art. It's the value of a payment. You can have the sovereignty of anything, you can have the ownership of anything, and that value can be transferred. Royalty, recurring revenue, any of those things. And so Algorand is the infrastructure that makes that happen. Just like the internet is what makes the transfer of information possible, blockchain is what makes that transfer of value possible. Algorand is a highly innovative, very, in the end, it's better, faster, cheaper infrastructure that works and is environmentally sustainable. And, once you get below that, you're getting into like very complicated cryptography, but what it boils down to, better, faster, cheaper, it works and it's sustainable. And so what we've seen is a significant amount of real world adoption where, beyond the headlines, beyond the sizzle, beyond the massive amounts of money being thrown around, you get real impact, whether it's for a small business that's able to eliminate that 3%. 3%, I grew up in a small business, a small family business. 3% is a lot on credit card transaction fees and more. And especially if you're doing business internationally, you've got blockchain that makes that effectively go away. That is like game changing for small businesses. So you can look at it on that front. You can look at it all the way up to, healthcare payments. Bermuda's doing all their remittances with their hospitals, insurance companies, payment providers, and patients. All their healthcare remittances are done on chain. Obfuscated, people don't know that that's what's happening, but effectively they're using better, faster, cheaper tech and infrastructure to make their model more efficient.
One of the things that you underscored that I think is the theme of the discussion here is this idea of usability of the technology and the manner in which blockchain technologies could be deployed to be able to drive economic prosperity and really access to opportunity. I mean, most of our cities, as we know, depend upon the creative economy, artists, musicians, and there is an opportunity via technologies like blockchain for folks who might not be able to currently make it to be able to leverage and harness those technologies. And so, Mayor Suarez, I want to loop back to you because you've talked a lot about this idea in Miami of this energy and effort towards the city becoming the capital of capital. And within that, of course, you've described that, and I'll have you share more about what do you mean by that. But what is your vision for blockchain in America's cities? Like, what does you've envisioned capital of capital for Miami, but in your role as president of the U.S. Conference, how do you see blockchain playing a critical role in America's cities going forward?
Well, I think there are two good questions. The first is why do I keep branding Miami as the capital of capital? Why is that important for me? I think we're living in a new world where things are changing extremely rapidly, where disruption at the pace of disruption is almost exponential. And we're transitioning from an industrial economy to a digital economy. And so, and we're also decentralizing. So what we see happening is companies are being built or created or founded and being capitalized in a particular place, but they're creating jobs across America, and in some cases they're creating jobs across the world. So you know, when you look at this new world, this new landscape, and you think about your city, in my case Miami, and I think about where Miami's positioned, we're right in the center of 5 major markets, which are New York, California, South America, Europe, and the Middle East. I think of us as the central hub or the central point of a wheel that has 5 spokes. And that center will allow anyone who wants to scale, who wants to grow a company, who wants to create a company, to be in touch quickly with the 5 markets that are massively around it, or those markets will converge into the city of Miami because of its central location, and those decisions will be made there. So that's sort of where I see the world going, and that's why I think trying to be the capital of capital is significant, because it creates opportunities for my residents, right? You know, most cities deal with income inequality. Most cities deal with poverty. In our city, we're #1 in the nation in wage growth, right? But there's also explosive inflation. And so it's almost like a competition to see, you know, hopefully we can grow wages by a greater percentage than inflation is growing. But it's like this incredible battle. I mean, every city that I visit, I want everyone to hear this, every city that I visit, and it's sad, almost within the first 5 minutes of me visiting them, they're talking about the increase in rents. Almost every city. And so, you know, that's something that we've got to figure out. So I think that's part of it. I think in terms of why blockchain, you know, for us to have stepped into this potential opportunity, we needed a differentiator. We needed something that could brand the city differently. And for us, it was definitely crypto technologies, which are, you know, broadly under the rubric of fintech. The fact that we were willing, that we understood the technology, you know, that I was able to sort of understand the technology at its root level and take calculated risks to position the city, like I said, has increased the ecosystem, right? There's been this massive ecosystem where we're now #1 in the nation in tech job growth. We're #1 in the nation in tech job migration. Like I said, we're #1 in wage growth. And Financial Times recently named us the most important city in America. So why did that happen? It happened because we saw opportunities. We were not afraid of those opportunities. On the contrary, we tried to learn as much as we could, and we took some calculated risks to get ahead of what I call the tsunami of opportunity. So, you know, I think for me, crypto technologies, whether they be NFTs, whether they be smart contracts, whether they be blockchain-related applications, are all going to revolutionize the world that not only we live in, but that our children live in. And so whenever that happens, as any good business person will tell you, you certainly see these opportunities come, you've got to get there. And that's what we try to do.
So I want to double click for a second before I jump to Mayor Shivi, because you oftentimes talk about the agenda for the city is only as effective as those individuals that are at the lowest point on the economic spectrum. So when you think about blockchain technologies, and we know as a function of the pandemic, we think of our everyday friends and neighbors and family members that might have lost their jobs for a range of different reasons. You've thought about this opportunity around blockchain technologies sort of aligned with a lot of the discussions around the future of work and the skills economy. And as a function of that, have leaned in with community colleges and K-12. Yeah. Can you talk about that? Because for our friend and neighbor that might have worked at the dry cleaner that lost their job, that's now trying to get themselves upskilled for this new economy, you've made that a central piece of the work that you're doing. Can you talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I think that there's a misperception that this new technological world is exclusive instead of inclusive. And I think we tried to take that on head on. You know, first of all, almost every technology company needs non-technology employees. So that is in some cases the majority of the employees. So I think that's the first fact. 55% of the employees in the technology company are not technologists. They're not engineers. I think the second part is, and we were just with a $1 billion company that I did what I call Cafecito Tech Talk with, and they were talking about a certification program that they do, where at the end of the certification program, you can be a digital marketer, right? So this is not something that requires a 4-year degree. This is not something that requires a ton of school debt, right? So that people don't get indebted and get behind. You can get a certification and you can be making $70, $80, $90, $100,000 as a digital marketer right away. So I think that's the second piece of it. The third piece of it is for the unbanked and for people who are immigrants in this country who are sending money back to their country of origin in the form of remittances, the ability to send that money efficiently, quickly, and inexpensively is incredibly important. And then to be able to invest in certain assets and asset classes that are alternative in nature, that the laws oftentimes preclude people from investing in, that's a big deal, because what happens is we want to protect people from getting hurt, and that's important. But we also sometimes, in our efforts to protect them, we prevent them from building wealth. And then we have income inequality. So the people who are wealthiest get the best opportunities to stay wealthy and to get wealthier. And the people who are poorest are not even allowed to invest in some of these alternative assets. So I think that's something as a country we have to take a hard look at.
Thank you. Yes. You gotta clap it there. So, Mayor Shivi, we've gotten a chance to get to know you because you came down from Reno to the crypto summit in Miami, and something that I've come to really admire about you, and I know Mayor Suarez has underscored this about you, is that you're a tough question asker, and you and so as a function of that, you've built a lot of impact. And so for a city like Reno, as you were assessing the opportunities around crypto, what were some of the tough questions you asked yourself and you asked your team about trying to make a showing for crypto and blockchain technologies in your city? Because there's a lot of commonality between cities like Reno and many of the mayors that are represented here. And I know that you are, as I've described, the tough question asker. Like, what was that chain of thinking look like?
Yeah, that's such a good question, and I think too, it's also, and I think Mayor Suarez would understand this, as you know, in our business, to be sort of the first to come out and do something, you're going to take a lot of heat, and right?
Yeah, 100%.
And people are going to be really critical, and I always say, when we stop trying is when we fail, right? And I think though, what people probably don't understand, we're in Web 2.0 right now, and Web 3.0 is really what they're calling the people's web, right? And so I started to research it. I've actually been investing in cryptocurrency for about 5 years now, 6 years. And just really fascinating, and I'm so glad you brought this up, Mayor Suarez, 7 million people in the United States are unbanked. It's a lot of people. And that's because the system is incredibly broken. And especially too, if you are a small business owner, I love that you mentioned that. That was like number one thing for me. Like looking at the credit card fees that we pay is outrageous, right? And so the system is really, really broken. And so that's what I kept thinking is like, we've got to be able to use this technology in government. And one thing I love about blockchain technology is the transparency. It is really fascinating. And so, and I think, mayors, I was trying to figure out how do I talk about it in a way that mayors are going to understand, especially like with the NFT, this non-fungible token that you're seeing a lot and hearing a lot with artists, right? And the way I think the best way to explain it, how many mayors out there use a key to your city? How many of you have a key to your city that you give away, right? And it's a physical key, right? Well, what about when we digitize? Let's say we digitize this key for every mayor for your city. And when you can send it digitally now, right? And when you send it, it can unlock certain experiences. So now this is going to be a way that we can sort of attract different ways of travel and tourism and people to experience our cities through NFTs. So think of, the key to your city now digitized, right? So I think we can all understand that. And then you could collect them all. And me personally, I would try to collect them all to show what cities I've been in, right? So I think there's so many great use cases, and like I said, we're doing it now with our historical registry, because that information is so important and we don't want it to be manipulated. And not to mention with the transparency aspect, what if you can just go online and get a FOIA request at, a snap, right? And you know it's definitive truth. That's the other thing about smart contracts, is that it will be able to read if that information is fact or fiction. And how many of us have been seeing all the news about what's fake news, what's real news? We don't know what to believe. And that's why the Associated Press did just partner with a company called Chainlink to solidify definitive truth, to tell you when you read information, is that fact or fiction? And that's why one of the reasons I love what you guys are doing with Algorand. Amazing, amazing.
Kelly, so with that, thank you, Mayor Shivi. Kelly, with that, I'd love for you to share about some of the real world use cases of how Algorand companies and projects are building on blockchain that you all have undertaken both domestically and also, quite frankly, globally, some really fascinating projects.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I think from my perspective, having been in this space for 4 or 5 years, a lot of our work has been done outside the US, and it's amazing to be sitting up here with the two of you and seeing you embracing it and what you've done to your cities over the past couple of years, because that's different. And not only is it the job creation, but you're making it okay for people to talk about it, and it's going to impact nearly every single industry, just like the internet messed us all up, right? Like, this is gonna have the same thing. So, in Miami, and I spend a lot of time there, right? Like, you've got these different startups that are thinking completely differently. I come from a city in the Northeast that's got a decent financial center, and they're not there yet, right? And so you've got people thinking about these things, and it's great to see that innovation that I was fearful was only happening outside of our country is now happening here in the US in some great pockets. So when you get to use cases, I think, Mayor Shive, you brought up the creator economy. I'm gonna give a quick example. There's a company called, I think everybody can wrap their heads around this because everyone generally understands music and artists, and you're a fan of a particular artist and you wanna support that artist and listen to that artist's music. Stowy is a company, the song that owns itself. They have artists, well-known artists, that are launching songs instead of through a record label, who takes maybe 90% of that. Instead of through a record label, they're launching it through this platform called Stowy. Because of the low transaction fees and the way that you can tokenize an asset and break it up into millions of pieces without, if you were to go and, I want to own a piece of Britney Spears' next song, it's going to cost me just $7,000 in legal work to get to that point, right? Versus these artists are now able to launch through this platform. And DMC did one at South by Southwest a few weeks ago. 700 people now own a part directly of the song that he released, and they get any future rights, royalties, recurring revenues off that song because they are participating in his model, versus the old model where a lot of that wouldn't be possible because of financial barriers, high cost to entry to participate in that model. So that's that's in the creator economy. It's not just an NFT that represents something, but it has to have utility. Like you're saying, that key has utility. That NFT that's part of that song's ownership has utility. I get recurring revenue every time it plays on the radio, every time someone plays at a concert, right? So you've got really cool use cases like that. I think the other thing is, there's a lot of conversation about historical records, death certificates, marriage certificates, different types of IP or land registries. Nigeria just announced a week or two ago, I spent 2 hours on the phone last Saturday. I was telling Saif this with Dr. Yaori. He is the register of the country of Nigeria, Nigeria being the largest economy in Africa, with a lot of those other countries in Africa looking at what they're doing. Nigeria is taking all of their IP registries, so their entire IP registry, and putting it on Algorand's blockchain. Again, better, faster, cheaper, more efficient way to manage that system. And Dr. Yaori is super excited about it because he thinks it brings immense opportunity, not only to his constituents to make sure that they know who owns what and that there's no fraud and there's no theft within the system, but it's better for his country, it's better for his economy. It lets them participate on the global stage because that IP being managed on chain outside of the boundaries of within Nigeria becomes much more efficient and easier too.
Yeah. And you could do that with actually city land.
Yeah.
So we can actually all own a piece of city land, and when you sell it, the dividends go to your community.
Yeah, distributed.
So this is how you bring
You can do it
those-
with land. You can do it. Colombia and Peru are doing it with COVID passports, right? Like you can do it with anything that needs to be validated and verified. That's right. But yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Incredible.
So I want to go to the area of something that we can't dismiss given when we turn on the news and we see the volatility in global markets. Mayor Suarez, you're somebody that oftentimes gives a clear sort of synthesis of what's going on. And so for your colleague mayors that are trying to make informed decisions about this particular space, and at the same time, they're looking at the volatility in the global markets, and fear can easily undertake all of us because we look at some of the global macroeconomic conditions. What advice would you give to mayors about making better decisions about utilizing these types of technologies? And then that's one. And then I think a follow-on question for you and Mayor Sheevy would be, what type of resources could be created, almost a toolkit, to help mayors in making decisions in and around blockchain technologies? The first question for you is really about how do you help, what advice do you have for mayors that are navigating a fear environment about trying to make informed decisions about blockchain technologies or really any frontier technologies?
Well, first of all, it's understandable. I mean, I think there's so many aspects to that question. I think the first is, I often find that it's somewhat generational. My dad, who was a mayor, I think you guys met him at the last conference. He spoke very briefly. He is a mechanical engineer, graduated Summa, presidential scholarship, 2 graduate degrees from Harvard, has written 8 books and speaks 5 languages. And he struggles sometimes understanding some of these concepts because they're not innate to him, just like Minecraft is not innate to me. Right? So I see my son playing it, I kind of get it, but I kind of don't get it. You know, I'm not sure that I totally understand it. So I think that's part of it. I think the other part is with any risk that you take, there are rewards. And as Mayor Sheevy said, there are risks, right? You know, you get involved in projects that have good foundations, but these are new technologies. So it just has to be off a little bit. And all of a sudden, it doesn't work quite the way you want it, and then you have to answer questions from the press, and that's part of it. You have to be willing to take the good with the bad, and understand that again, the greater good, which is what I often stress, is what it's done for our ecosystem, for our economy, which is indisputable. Whether Bitcoin is at 30,000 or 25 or 50 or 60, is indisputable. And I think you got to you have to really fundamentally understand some of this stuff, right? And I'm just going to take Bitcoin as an example because it's the best known. It's the one that people hear the most about. You know, I get asked on national television all the time, hey, Mr. Mayor, what do you think about the volatility? And I said, look, I look at it a little differently. You know, you're talking about an asset, a digital asset, where now in today's market, which is perfectly liquid, right? You can be in an exchange and get in and out of Bitcoin instantly, 24/7. You can't even do that in the stock market, okay? You've got an asset that is priced 30,000 times more valuable than the base currency of the world, the US dollar. Why do I say that? Because it takes 30,000 US dollars to buy 1 Bitcoin, right? That was not always the case when Bitcoin started. And if you look at the history of Bitcoin, almost invariably, every year, with the exception of every 5th year or something like that, it's increasing by astronomical percentages in terms of its growth. But the real thing about Bitcoin, I think, and Algorand as well, is not the price of Algorand or the price of Bitcoin per se. It's how their applications are going to change the world. How the applications that are built on the Algorand network are going to change the world. How Bitcoin, if it ends up being the predominant store of value and currency, can change the world. It can disrupt, socialist dictatorships. It can create bankability for the unbanked. It can actually create fiscal discipline for federal governments. I know that's a foreign concept, right, for so many people. It has these abilities because once this asset is not controlled by government, government has to play by a set of rules that are democratized, right? That are given by the community, not by a set of individuals that hold power. And that's extremely liberating. And let me tell you, in a decentralized world that we're living in, get used to that as a governance model. People sort of implementing solutions on a decentralized basis, and those solutions being automatically implemented. It's a little bit different than representative democracy, where you elect someone and you entrust that person with the ability to make a decision on your behalf, and then if you don't like it over a period of time, one day you can change that person. This thing could be very disruptive for governance as well.
So on that, the power of disruption, there's also the opportunity, and you've underscored this in the journey in Miami, around who are the stakeholders that cities need to bring together to be able to build and co-create solutions in the same way that cities undertake to tackle things like the high school dropout crisis or child obesity or other sort of important issue topics. Who are the key stakeholders from your vantage point, Mayors Sheevy, Mayor Suarez, and then Kelly, that should be coming together? And then also, what would an ideal toolkit look like? If you're a city and you're a mayor that's out here and you're trying to figure out how to navigate this jump, right? What should be in that toolkit? So I want to start with, who are the stakeholders that should be convened? And then what should that ideal toolkit look like, involving both public and private partners?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. First of all, what I'd say, because especially lately, right, the last, I don't know, month, we're getting a lot of questions about, the volatility, and you made a mistake, Mayor, like by going all in on, Bitcoin. You hear all these, right? Yeah. And I always say, invest in the innovation and technology because you truly, truly believe in it, right? And not the hype. Because it's so easy for everyone to want to run and jump in there and think they're going to make, millions off of Bitcoin. I mean, that's not why you invest in something, first of all, right? I would say this is why Mayor Suarez and I feel really passionate about talking about it, because it's going to come on your desk at some point. It is. And just like when we started talking about it, and I know you did too, I had a lot of companies come to me and say, we can do this, we can do that, we can do this. And honestly, you have to be very careful about who you are doing business with, and you do have to vet them. And that's why Mayor Suarez and I, again, wanted to keep talking about it, because cities are going to start seeing projects and people knocking on your door. And so, projects and companies like Algorand are really helping us, see who's doing what in the space and what really is possible, because a lot of people will overpromise and underdeliver. So that was one of the reasons that we said we should be talking about it now, so that cities kind of know what's happening in the space and also can come to us for resources. And one of the things I did that you can do, and it's very easy, and I would say this, and I love it because it brought in new constituents into my office. I created a blockchain board, and having, young and much smarter people than me sit down and collaborate and think about, and it was amazing to me to find out how involved they wanted to be in their cities. Like, it was incredible to see so many young people in technology want to be helpful to government. I thought that was just fascinating. But sitting down with them and hearing their ideas, and they came to me with a Reno DAO on a white paper for a DAO. It's just awesome. And I think there's a lot of promise for the future. But I also think you do have to be careful and working with companies like you guys and others in the space. But it's just been so fascinating to watch. And I think, remember, this is long term, right? How many of you wanted to invest in Facebook 20 years ago? Think about that. So I always kind of look at what I'm investing in, like, this is the long term. But it's going to change exactly how we do business. And matter of fact, in Dubai, they are launching in the Metaverse City Hall. Mm-hmm. And you will be able to go and get your license at City Hall. You'll be able to get anything you want in the Metaverse. And Dubai is the place where they're doing it. So this is happening. So as mayors, if you want to be relevant in your cities, and especially to younger generations and people that want to see excitement and new companies and people building and investing in your city, it's time to really pay attention.
Kelly, what about from your perspective? What should be in that toolkit?
Well, I think there's this concept of start small and think big, right? And whether that's with the other thing is a lot of this public open infrastructure. It's public, it's open source. And so it's a matter of bringing some of your constituents together, getting around a table and tackle one problem at a time. Saif, you mentioned obesity. There's literally a company that's doing move to earn on chain. Instead of all of your fitness data or activity going up into one big conglomerate, like it goes back into more of a community-oriented thing where everyone has access to that data, everyone's participating and getting things out of it. And so I think if you start small, start with a problem in your city, bring some smart, like younger generation, older generation, technical leaders, like people that understand some of this stuff, bring it together, start tackling one problem, like tackle one thing and see what you can test and trial. Like I know there's innovators in every corner of this country. So I think, you know, start small, start with a use case and think big about what its possibility is and what its potential is.
And Mayor Suarez, you've done a lot on the community education side. Particularly, you did something very fascinating with an organization called 5,000 Role Models a few months ago. Could you share a little bit about that the importance and the centrality of community in these efforts around blockchain?
Yeah, I think particularly 5,000 Role Models was exciting for me because it's an organization, a mentorship organization started by a congresswoman in the Miami area, where they started with 500 role models and they now have 5,000 kids in the public school system that are being mentored and go through this program, which is a phenomenal program. But what you realize is that things that are scary or uncertain for my generation are exciting for the next generation, right? For them, the idea of being involved and knowing more, you know, we brought a famous author, Being Black in Bitcoin, who wrote that book, and I think, you know, Isaiah Washington, right?
Yep.
Who came and spoke to the kids as well. So I mean, it was an incredible opportunity. I also think you have to marshal educational resources, right? And not just community resources, but also getting the educational institutions involved. And I think that's, and then what happens is it becomes kind of contagious. I get messages all the time from you know, business owner who will tell me, oh, I'm doing this crypto initiative, or I'm accepting Bitcoin, or I'm doing something with Algorand, where we're trying to create a new concept, a new application. So it becomes infectious, and the entire business community also wants to be a part of it. But I think Mayor Shivi is right too, that having a board, you'd be surprised at how many people who want to step up and are actually really smart. I've often said that, you know, again, going to my point, which got one clap earlier, you know, we underestimate the intelligence of people, you know, and it's patronizing, particularly from government's perspective. And I've been in so many restaurants where the server will come up to me, or the maitre d', and will start talking to me about crypto, and I realize that this person quite possibly knows more about it than I do. Right? They have a stronger level of sophistication. We use the word sophistication in investing, right? Like, and we equate money with sophistication as opposed to intelligence with sophistication, right? And there's people that are much more sophisticated, understand the technology at a much deeper level, and are probably making much better educated decisions on what they invest in. But investment is tough, right? That's the beauty of America, right? Is you know, you have an opportunity to gain and to win, which is the risk component of a return on investment. But you also, because it's called risk, you also have the possibility of losing, and that does happen as well. And I think we have to be realistic about that and tell people about that as well.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to get to our final question that I'm going to ask all of our panelists, and it's actually a two-part question. And
have any of your questions not been a two-part question?
No.
I gotta call him.
Come on,
Thank you, sir. Come on, sir. So the final question is really looking forward from where we are now to the year 2030, and asking each one of you to share, how do you think blockchain will be utilized in America's cities by the end of the decade? That's one. And then the follow-on is, which I think is much more important, how do we help our mayors and cities get there?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll go first. I think you were talking about also why is it so important in cities, and I would say if you are not fostering innovation in your city, then those innovators will leave. So that's why it's so important. So that's number one. I would say, you know, we're really going to see, and I mean, we've all talked about this, you know, so much, but truly think about it in the way we vote, right?
Very true.
Blockchain in the way we vote. That is going to transform, right? So, you know, when everyone says, oh, the system is so broken, well, it's going to get really interesting, but it's going to get really good because of blockchain technology. And again, I would just say, you know, research, and obviously a lot of these companies are new, but there are great companies out there like Algorand and others that are in the space and working with mayors. And like I said, I think the most powerful thing as a mayor that we get to do is open the doors for other people. And so, like I said, you might not understand the technology, but there are a lot of people in your community that do. People reach out to me all the time on Twitter. That's another thing, you know, it's really great, like read Twitter. Like I love Twitter because it's like quick and fast, and if you're following like, you know, Bitcoin Twitter or blockchain Twitter, it's just got a lot of really good information. And mayors, you don't have a lot of time, but you can like scroll through it. But I get a lot of people reaching out to me from all over the world, all over the world. And so I want to be able to kind of bring people together in the space with their mayor. So if someone reaches out to me from New York City, I can say, hey, I'd like to put you in touch with your mayor. And we can create an ecosystem that way. So we're all sort of building and connecting. But I would say definitely you got to research. Sometimes you got to hodl, which means hold on for dear life. Right?
I just bought some Bitcoin, by the way, when I was up on stage.
Yeah. Well, and what I want to point out, good for you.
My salary.
Yeah, good for you.
I did.
Is fractional shares, right? Why? Because, you know, we're talking about gold. The difference of Bitcoin is the fractional shares. You can't buy gold in fractional shares, but you can buy it in fractional shares in Bitcoin. So you can start off incrementally, because there's a lot of people saying, how do I start? How do I invest in this, right? And that's the other thing that is so fascinating about it, is being able to buy those fractional shares. So you can really buy, you know, slowly.
You couldn't buy fractional shares in stock either. You have to buy a stock, right? Which is why you would have to force these stock splits to keep the price down so that a normal person could buy it. And which is why the price of Bitcoin is not that relevant, because you can buy fractional interest in Bitcoin. It doesn't have to be a whole Bitcoin. It's not like you need to buy a Bitcoin to purchase something. Yeah. If that were the case, then the price would be much more important. The price is really more of a reflection of the general market, and it's a reflection of how it does versus other currencies, and where the other currencies are vis-a-vis Bitcoin, which is essentially a self-propagating mechanism.
Kelly?
Yeah, I think, you know, embrace the innovation. There's, you know, there are people that want to be doing these things, so embrace it. Let your newspapers write about it. Like, let people talk about it. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of strange headlines. But if you sift through that, which takes some work, and I get it, I understand that, but you got to like start the dialogue, and you got to have the conversation and let those conversations happen to let that innovation happen. I think that's one really important piece. And the other piece is, you know, it's still new, it's still nascent. I know there's a lot to learn. You know, I'm happy to talk about doing basic education 101 on blockchain for a go around with this crowd. Like, I think there's a lot to learn and wrap your heads around, but there's a lot of companies that want to be out there and want, you know, we're an open source public blockchain. I'm not actually selling anything. We've got a thriving ecosystem that's building on top of us, because those applications, to Mayor Suarez's point, are going to be important. And I want people to build on a better, faster, cheaper, environmentally sustainable blockchain that works. That's why I'm here, right? And so I think just educating yourself and like looking at companies that are willing to come in and help educate, you know, your offices, your councils, your employees, like, you know, there's a lot of people that are there for you and want to embrace and work with you.
And I would say in the next 10 years, first of all, I'd say today we're probably at the 5% or less of use cases that we're going to see from this kind of technology.
Less.
In the next, less than 5%. Yeah, I was trying to be generous. I think, you know, hopefully in the next 10 years we'll be like at the 50% mark of use cases that'll be developed and utilized. But when you think about it, these are the things that I think you should think about. I think you should think about the environment, right? What is the impact of these technologies on the environment? I think you should think about transactional speed, right? How fast are some of these transactions? You should think about cost, things that Kelly mentioned. You should think about a fractionalization, they call it tokenization, fractionalization, right? The ability to be fractional and that be transferable easily. That's really important. The way this building was built on two things, debt and equity, right? The debt portion was a bank, right, who gives the percentage of the money it makes to its shareholders, not necessarily to its account holder. And the equity is basically a bunch of rich people who, put in whatever the difference is between what the bank would lend and what it costs, right? That's the way you do it. But if you fractionalize that equity piece, now an everyday person, a regular person could say, hey, this is a great business, great idea. Having a big hotel, casino, convention center, and I want to buy that. I want to buy the equity of that. I want to buy the debt because I don't want to take as much risk as the equity. So I want to buy the debt. So I think that's another thing. I think the NFT part of it is basically unique digital assets. Think of an ability to understand that a digital asset can be made uniquely and you can prove that it's unique. How do we know for a fact that the Mona Lisa that sits in the Louvre is the actual Mona Lisa? How do we know that for a fact, right? So, with digital assets, there is a way through cryptography to guarantee that a digital asset is unique, and that is, that has a lot of value. And then I think on the currency front, there is going to be massive disruption, whether it's, digital central bank digital currencies that ultimately win the day, or whether it's, these non-government controlled, non-fiat digital currencies that win the day. There will be massive disruption. And when you see inflation like what we're seeing, government spending like what we're seeing, monetary policy like what we're seeing, it is inevitable that the market is not just going to sit back and take it, not when the kinds of technologies that exist today exist.
Well,
negative 1 second. That was
negative 1 second.
You were right on the money.
That's pretty good.
Well,
Good job.
Mayor Suarez, over to you to conclude our panel.
I just want all of you to join me in thanking our great moderator, our great panelists for this discussion. Let's put your hands together for them. These are very important meetings and forums as listed in your program and on our app. So there will be a special plenary session at noon where we will be addressed by none other than the Vice President of the United States, Ms. Kamala Harris. Following her address, we will be transitioning into our Climate Protection Awards luncheon, where our featured speaker will be the President of the Republic of Colombia, Iván Duque, who's a phenomenal speaker and leader. So for now, the session stands adjourned.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Algorand. Thank you.
Thank you,
for all
Algorand.
do. Thank you.